Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the virtual breakfast sessions. Today is January 28th, 2026. It is a frigid 13, 14 degrees outside, but it's warm in here. So, without further ado, let's get into mocktails. Trendy, healthy, um, higher ROI without liability. But before we go into that, let's thank the person who's paying the bills today. Ed Flanagan in the Era Group. Listen, if you think you're spending too much money on taxes, and everybody should be shaking their head, yes, ERA Group has a 125, an IRS 125 plan that will reduce your taxes you're paying on your employees some 20 to 40%. And it's legal. So if you want to know more, call Ed Flanagan at the ERA Group. That's E Flanagan at eragroup.com. Back to the show. Mocktails. When I was a kid, a mocktail was either a Darth Vader or later on a Shirley Temple, or preceded by a Shirley Temple. But things have gotten different these days. And today we have someone on the show that can give you the ins and outs in mocktails and basically why they should be in your restaurant. Heather, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hello, everybody. My name is Heather Ransom. I am a 30-year restaurant consultant, owned my own bar for 20 years, and I specialize in profitability optimization and growth in my consulting firm. But I leaned into what we call the no-low world about 5 years ago, after I started to identify that it was an area of opportunity for my restaurant operators, but they're having a really hard time navigating the process, and opened up this whole world of like learning more about why, how, when, where to do no-low or mocktails, if you will. And then really started researching in such depth that I actually wrote a book about it, which is coming out for hospitality professionals.
So why mocktails?
Well, that's a very deep question. Well, mocktails in of itself is just one part of the bigger picture of no-low. So no-low means non-alcoholic, low alcohol uh, programming. And in the beginning, when I started to do my research, it was because I myself was in the hospitality space for so many years. But then when I decided to revisit my relationship with alcohol and drinking, I was having a hard time finding hospitable venues that actually had things for me. And it was very strange because I've spent my whole life in restaurants. Where do I go? I've been a single diner. I go to bars. I love the environment, but I wasn't really feeling welcome in my own home. And I thought, well, if I'm doing that and I'm a restaurant person, what is the general public seeing? And nobody's charging me for my tonic waters at the bar, so they're losing money. That was like my first thing. So then I started to really get into why is it such a stopping point, and why are restaurants having a hard time embracing it, and why is it growing? Why is it growing? And there's a lot of answers to that. There's generational answers. There's benefits of health answers. There's a whole shift in our industry and in our culture toward, flex drinking, really. It's not even about being a sober person. It's just people are just revisiting their relationships with alcohol.
Okay, so I see the two biggest drivers with mocktails are Gen Z and Ozempic. Can you speak on that a bit?
I can. And I think that I'm not going to speak to the Ozempic thing because I don't really know enough about that, to be honest with you. I think that we can talk about low sugar and calorie intake and being more mindful about that, which is really what we're talking about when we're talking about the Ozempic sect. Um, there has been a better for you movement happening for many, many decades. And we have answered the call in hospitality many times over. with gluten-free, with vegetarianism, veganism. I remember many clients of mine would say, pizza guys, I'm never putting a cauliflower pizza on my menu,
Yep.
and now you're hard pressed not to find a pizzeria that's adopting it. So I think there's a better for you movement that's happened. That's a new term, but that's really kind of this healthfulness that seeping into that Ozempic space. But that's like a bookend. There's like a spectrum, I think, that's happening. There is the better for you movement, which spans all generations. But the younger generation was brought up with it. They're not untethering themselves to old ways of thinking like the older generation may be. I think as a Gen X parent, part of it is that all that messaging when we were growing up, the mad, sad, all that, dare, we now have children that we instilled those messages to. So while we as the older generations are untying ourselves and putting ourselves to the better for you movement, our children are being raised up in that messaging. And so they also grew up with cannabis as an option. And there's much better reasons to be doing that if you're picking any stimulant. But a lot of Gen Z and the younger generations are picking no stimulants because they're trying to be so healthful. That squish that's happening with those two segments, and of course, there's a lot of things in between, is really putting pressure on the industry. They're going to have to respond. They are going to have to respond because, as you can see with some of the data points that are coming out, alcohol sales are plummeting all over the globe, not just in America.
Okay, so let's talk a bit about the reluctance of restaurateurs. Restaurant we go to all the time has two mocktails on their menu, and one of which is a variation on lemonade. They tend to serve an older audience. And I keep telling them the great thing about boomers is that I'm one of them. I'm here, I'm spending money. The problem with boomers is A, they're not making any more boomers. And B, we're leaving the house slowly but surely. So if you plan to be in business for a long time, how do you introduce mocktails? How do you design something that's not such a gigantic leap from Scotch to, or a Manhattan to a mocktail?
Larry, that is a very good question. That's why I wrote this book, because it is very difficult to navigate. And it's not one size fits all because it depends a lot on, to your point, who is my demographic? Who am I serving? Now, if you're a smart business owner, you realize that you have to replace your customers all the time. You lose customers for a lot of reasons. Customers change their habits, they change their taste, they move, they do lots of things. And so because I'm a restaurant consultant, part of my job is to pull in new revenue streams and replace ones that I know we're going to lose. And a lot of restaurants aren't looking at the no-low lens as one of those things to do that with, one of the tools in the toolbox, if you will. But it's very hard. It's hard as a restaurant consultant who's opened over 200 restaurants, multi-unit restaurants, franchise, you name it, a little cafe to a high-end restaurant. It is not like we have ever seen before as restaurant business development people. Because as you probably know, if I wanted to bring in a new product, a new line, a new category, I just ring up my sales guys, maybe my broadliners, maybe somebody like, bring me up all your samples, everything you got, right? Because we're lazy, because we're busy. We're lazy and busy, and we're efficient, and we want our salespeople to do the work for us. But the salespeople don't even know how to navigate it because there isn't like a non-alcoholic beverage distribution, right, center. There's not a specialist because it's so difficult to navigate because they don't know who their audience is. And nobody does. I mean, even the no-low brands don't. So when you're going to approach it, I do a couple things. I think that I'm going to talk straight with you guys. It's may anger and tick off some of our listeners here, but some of what I've found is that restaurants are reluctant to bring it on because it is hard. It's not easy to do. And they may have their own relationship with alcohol and alcohol sales revenue that preclude them from wanting to make the jump. If I'm a person that throws a party every day, which is what we do in the restaurant business, and now I'm talking about not having alcohol, that terrifies me because how am I going to throw a party if people aren't loose? Number one. Number two, what about my margins? Now, we all can agree probably in this room, if you have a liquor license, you're making most of your money on your profit, I should say, where you're, good revenue on balancing out the high rising costs of your food, right? Food and labor are through the roof. You are leaning harder than ever on the margins on the alcohol side. So now what do you do? Now I think a lot of operators are kind of have their head in the sand about it because they're like, I don't know what this is going to mess up my whole books. It's like it's a disaster. Now we went through COVID together. We saw restaurants are very resilient and they're very used to embracing change, but they're not embracing this like anything else. Can I back up a little bit and tell you a little bit about my history?
Please.
My lens is a little bit, besides being an owner myself for many years, I had a liquor store and a restaurant and a music venue all under one roof. I also used to make beer for a living. I was a microbrewer back in the 90s during the beer renaissance. And this absolutely stinks of back then. When you would walk in to a bar and you'd say, do you have something hoppy or an IPA? And they'd look at their bottle cooler and they'd see their Coors Light, Miller Lite, Budweiser, and maybe a Yingling Lager or something, or maybe a Sierra Nevada, and that's it. That's all you got. They were terrified to move into the craft beer space because it was a crazy landscape, totally different. They didn't understand how it works. And it was going to tick off maybe my basic revenue or my salespeople who were already were giving me like a free keg of Rolling Rock for every two. And now I'm saying, well, I'm going to put this $85 IPA on draft. So the ecosystem, that's the problem. The ecosystem is being challenged. And I think that a lot of people are like, I don't know what to do. There's real reasons for that, which is why I wrote the book. There's the cultural reasons, which I have an audit in there. I say, maybe your restaurant is not culturally ready for change. That's okay. I just want you to start thinking about it and do a little thing, just to keep you guys afloat and starting to bring that replacement customer in, which is like the Gen Z. I'll pause there for any feedback or questions on that. But I think that that's the truth. And I think that what you're seeing in the restaurant space, to your point, Larry, where you see these lemonades, is like they don't know what to do. So that's the best. They're going to dip in not even their whole toe, their toenail in the water.
So my question is, let's flip this again and look at it the other way. In other words, if I'm used to selling cocktails for between $15 and $19, let's say, there was a cost with alcohol to make that cocktail. And then there was and I don't know the math. So what was the profit out of that $15 to $19 cocktail? Is it 40%?
75% or more, probably.
So in order for me to replicate or create a new set of cocktails that are going to deliver a 75% margin, what does that look like? Does it look like updated? Does the juice and the mixer become more important than actually what's going into the cocktail? Does the glass change? In other words, let's look at it from an operator standpoint, from creating a product that's going to have profit on it. How should I approach that? What should that look like in order to even make this happen? In other words, we have the concept. Now, how do we execute it?
Well, that's a very good point. You have to know your market. Who are you trying to appeal to? Is it the Gen Z? They're looking for experience. So forget just having a good, if you're appealing to that person, they want it to be flashy, interesting, something to talk about with an education, period. If they want probably some other kind of stimulant, okay? So we're talking a little bit about this NOLO world.
Yeah.
I created this new term I'm using in the book because we don't have a term for it, but called Nova Elixir, okay? Something that is not a mocktail, That's not a replica. So there's a lot of these replicas out there that are like a replica gin. So now if I'm just putting a non-alcoholic gin inside with the drink, is that enough? There has been pushback from the market on that, because if it looks like a gin and tonic and it doesn't have alcohol in it, why am I still paying $15 for it? And a lot of these replica alcohols are as expensive as regular alcohol. Do you know why?
Because it can.
No, it's extremely expensive to make non-alcoholic spirits and beers.
Okay.
Because there's no alcohol in it. That means there's no natural pasteurization or alcohol, so it becomes a shelf life issue. There's that. And they have to invest in big technologies that they haven't really proved out yet. So if I'm going to get a tunnel pasteurizer, I better have enough ROI in a short, my break-even point better be closer than farther away. But my point is, because the bottleneck, pun intended, of the restaurant industry not embracing NOLO, the entire ecosystem is not moving forward. That's my feeling. Because I don't care if somebody, ex-mommy, wine mommy, tries a bottle of non-alcoholic wine. She's not drinking a case of it like she did before in a month. She's not. So the demand, even on the market level, is not as big as, because alcohol is an addicting product. Alcohol is a coping thing. So these guys are having a hard time getting a foothold. But if I went to a bar right now and they had a new product, that's where I would taste a new product. Nobody goes to a liquor store and grabs the new Absolute and buys it for $40 or whatever and takes it home. They're introduced to it by a bartender that may have some incentives, or the tasting girls are there. We don't have that in NOLO. I don't know if I answered your question or didn't answer your question, Fred, but some of these cost things are part of the problem. And if I'm going to bring in a non-alcoholic beverage and put it in my inventory and it's sitting on my shelf and it's not moving because I don't know how to market it, I don't know how to sell it, that's, even if I created a $15 cocktail. So back to my stimulant point. The big opportunity here is not the replicas, although they do a really good job for a certain segment. A Gen Z who's never drank before is not going to go get a fake gin and tonic. That they're not coming from and needing a transitional drink. To me, that segment is mostly from people who are former drinkers. Okay. And maybe are a flex drinker. At least 72% of the market for NOLO is a flex drinker. They still drink. They just don't drink. They want to do something in between, or not as much. Or to your point, Larry, I want to end the night. I still want a cocktail. My friends are here, but I don't want to have other alcohol drink. So what else is on the menu for me? So that the Gen Z is not going to drink that. They want something that's experiential and maybe has some sort of stimulant. And that's when we get into the adaptogens. So adaptogens are probably something you may be taking right now. Is anybody here taking like ashwagandha or L-theanine or anything like that? Like as a supplement?
No.
So there is an opportunity that I feel is being missed, because you can add some of these other supplements to your drinks. So now I'm paying $15, but it's going to help me sleep tonight when I get home because there's some sort of, relaxant in it.
Yeah.
Or I need hyper focus because I'm going to go hit the rave dance floor and I want to make sure I hear the boom, 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 and I want to be on. There is this whole, so that again is so much education, just like craft beer. There's a lot of education. So if you're a good hospitality professional, you kind of start with your lavender lemonades or whatever you say, Larry, because you're like, wow, that's a deep education. I don't know if it's going to be worth it. And maybe it's not if you don't do your homework and you don't know your market. Is that helpful?
Yes. I just thought about it while you're talking about this. Even for the boomers, I just went, as Fred knows, to a myriad of doctor's appointments where they were poking and prodding me, and every single one asked me if I drink. And as we get older, not only does we physically change, visibly change, but our pill intake is more. And every single one of them says, don't take with alcohol. And eventually somebody's wife is going to poke them and say, stop. And so if you're a a restaurateur that serves the boomers, this is something you should be introducing. So how do you get me or my wife to taste one of these non-alcoholic beverages as opposed to the French martini or something like that?
Well, it's like anything we ever try to sell in a restaurant. Your server has to be educated and suggest it. There's got to be some sort of incentive. That's a big problem with our bottleneck. If you're behind the bar, you know, a bartender, which I want to just pause here. There is a huge opportunity, listeners out there, for you as a bartender, if you're a bartender, to specialize in NOLO because it is going to become one of the biggest demanded spaces, like your old craft bartender with the handlebar mustache. That education is going to be huge and you're going to be in demand. But it starts with our staff. But our staff isn't going to buy in if the ownership isn't bought in, and they got to see an ROI. They got to see a bleed. Now, my feeling, sorry, Larry, but if I were in the old days and you sat at my bar and your wife said, Larry, you can't drink anymore, sweetie, get a tea or whatever, I'd be waiting to flip that seat. I'd be waiting to flip that seat, you know? So some of the things, it's a cultural thing, cultural awareness. How do I convince Larry or Larry's wife to get him to drink something else? I got to be incentivized as a server, a bartender, and an owner. What does that look like? Well, guess what?
Money.
The NOLO product base has zero marketing dollars. They don't have any marketing money.
Wow.
They're underfunded. Now, look, I'm saying that now because we're in this gap, okay? Alcohol's falling. All the big liquor houses that wanted to pretend NOLO wasn't going to be a thing are now seeing it's a thing.
Mhm.
And wineries are closed. Everybody's be like, oh, even though we told them for years, like 5 years I've been doing this. I know an author has been writing about this for 10. They didn't want to hear it because they're crisis, react on a crisis. We've been trying to tell them. They are now starting to look at this investment, but not because it's non-alcoholic, but because of the adaptogens and the THC cannabis relationship. A lot of our bartending and drinking environment is going to be replaced with THC, CBD, maybe psilocybin, something like to that end, and adaptogens. So now the alcohol industry is kind of perking up. Now it's not like I'm doing lemonades, right? Now, Dr. Oz said we can start administering THC and CBD to our seniors. The door is starting to crack a little bit, and it's going to be easier for companies that are in the alcohol space to move in to and grab their own existing market. I worry for my NOLO products that have been out there, cutting down the field and beating the path for alcohol because they were never really going to be the guy. I tell people all the time, build a non-alcoholic brand now to flip it tomorrow and sell it. That's your exit strategy. You probably make a ton of money just doing that because the big boys don't understand the market. NOLO is special because
So it's like the craft beer market all over again is what it is.
Exactly.
Okay.
So it's going to be interesting. I mean, it's fascinating to study because this is where culture meets business meets hospitality. And I believe you probably agree with me. Hospitality is the eyes and ears of this universe. We see it all. We know things are happening well before anybody else does because business doesn't happen and politics doesn't happen really in boardrooms and conference rooms. It happens over dinner or sitting at a bar. And honestly, like we know what's happening and we've reported in on NOLO, but nobody has responded in the way that we needed to. So again, back to my poor operators, it's not their fault. It's not their fault. They're not empowered. They don't have the tools. They don't have the information. And inside NOLO itself, this universe is pretty small. We don't even speak the same language because there's this sober section that's very anti-alcohol, which is not good for hospitality. And a lot of the beginning brands started their messaging that way, and they mess themselves up because people don't want to be aligned with sober. They want to be aligned with flex. That wasn't even a term. I mean, I could go on and on
What about
about that.
what about this movement called Dry January, and how can an operator, or how should an operator use this to gain momentum through the year with this change? What should that look like, or could it look like?
I love that question. Dry January was something that was invented in the UK, and now they're trying to actually brand it so you can't use it anymore, which is really weird. But Dry January really did serve a huge purpose maybe 3, 5, 7 years ago, whenever it came out. It's kind of out of fashion right now. So as part of my study, I started watching the media and what they wrote about NOLO over several years. And in the beginning, Dry January was very interesting. People wrote about it because January is a dead month for news, I guess. And there was this effort to go out and use do Dry January. The truth about Dry January is it's a great entry point if you are in hospitality, because that is when I suggest, even in the book, you should use Dry January as a test and launch your NOLO. Now, one of my case studies, which is a friend of mine who owns a brewery, believe it or not, and restaurant in Philadelphia called Bar Hugga, they actually started their NOLO program in Dry January, and it was so huge for their market. They have a great demographic, young mothers, yoga studios nearby, urban style living, very Brooklyn-esque. They loved it. And they were like, after school, they would come in and have a high-end mocktail. And he was, back then, this was like 2 years ago, I had him reporting some numbers, and he added $2,000 more in revenue for that month, which was not huge back then, but it was an indicator. And then that just kept going. That was just Dry January. So now if you times that by 12, right? So that's another 24 whatever $1,000 that he's making a year on mocktails. And he has a very short list. I think he only has like 5 or 6 on there. So Dry January is a great entry point because now everybody knows about it. In the beginning, people are like, Dry January. Dry January actually only really works for 3 weeks, not the full January, because people aren't really ready on like the New Year's Day. They're still drinking Bloody Marys, so forget it. Then they're like, all right, we'll start Monday. So that's kind of how that goes. And now Dry January is out of fashion because people don't need to quit. And I think that's what a lot of the NOLO movement did, is they made it cool. We made it cool. Like craft beer, we made it cool. At the beginning, craft beer was for geeks. We started making cool. As people started saying, no, I don't drink, and it's okay. Other people said, okay, well, they're being loud about it. I'm going to be loud about it. I'm going to wear it proud. I'm not going to hide what I want. And they started advocating. So advocacy has been the biggest problem. People who don't drink don't self-advocate in a hospitality situation historically. Why do you think that is?
Why?
Because it's not cool, man.
Okay.
It's not cool. And if a bartender, I say a bartender, and it happens to be still to this day, I'm in restaurants all day long. Hey, do you have any non-alcoholic beers? I think I have like a rusty Heineken Zero, like in the back of the fridge, or an O'Doul's or something, or whatever. And so now you're feeling what I say, othered. And that has been a big problem. And what the hospitality, and I'm using that term loosely, because hospitality is hospitality, it's hospitable. There is not a lot of hospitality given in the NOLO space by traditional alcoholic beverage centered places.
Yep.
So that has taken at least 5 years. I'm starting to see a little bit better, but Dry January is a good way to test your market, test your staff, test your culture, to that bartender's point. Test how are you going to talk about it. Marketing is very tricky when it comes to, how do I say as a bar, everyone comes here drinking, oh, Dry January, come, we're going to have this. It's very, very hard. I actually, in order to kind of break that open, 3 years ago, I did the world's first non-alcoholic bar crawl because it was an event. So I say events. If you're not starting Dry January, do an event. It's a one-off. You'll test the market. I'm going to have a mocktail. I'm teaching one on Thursday. I'm a mocktail making class. Let's learn more about it. use the curiosity of your potential market to see, and maybe you'll draw new customers that and what do we talk about? Replacing ones that are leaving. Events, Dry January is a good launch point. Then they came up with Dry July and Sober October. At this point, we're running out of months. So we're all just going to be flex drinkers. That's it. We're all going to just be flex drinkers. And Dry January is going to probably not, I don't think it's going to be have any longevity in the near future.
It's okay with me. It's okay with me.
What about a resource? And obviously, you have to lay out your social media and your marketing in order to drive it and support it. What about working with vendors to come in to bring product in to sample those products at those events? What should that role look like with potential distribution partners?
Let me break in before you say that. What kind of vendors are you talking about? It's not like you're talking about the
product,
the beer distributors.
No. I'm talking about high-end mixer companies, guys like Badger Beverage, people like that, et cetera, that have product and have a vested interest.
So chicken or egg, right? I launch a product. I don't know if everyone's going to use yet. How much money do I put into marketing? How much money do I pay that guy to get a case of beer in sales? This is where we're getting into that same space. Yes, there are companies out there doing it. Well-funded companies are doing that well. I suggest not going with a brand because most of them, let me back up. I opened my own coffee mocktail bar inside an existing restaurant that did not have a liquor license last year, Thanksgiving before last. Okay. When I wanted, I'm in the NOLA space. I wrote a book. When I needed samples, there was not a person to call. I had a hard time getting what I needed. You got to know somebody. You got to be in this circle. The best person to reach out to is not the brand itself, but it's a local influencer that is in the NOLA space because they're really our guerrilla marketing campaign. That's who I would take care of. And there's a couple of them. I started my own little program was calling like these zero proof go-getters. I was calling them because these people are very motivated because they're using that often as their own way to make their life unalcohol focused and moving into this new world. So there's a lot of influencers. They're the best people because not only do they know all the products in the marketplace, they also know other people that are like that. That's who I would reach out to.
Okay. Listen, time is our enemy. And we've hit that time again by the end of the show. Listen, thanks for being on the show, Heather. I appreciate it. I also have to thank Ed Flanagan and the Error Group. Listen, if you're sick of paying taxes, call Ed, find out about the IRS sanctioned 125 plan. It will put dollars and cents back in your pocket without any extra expenditure. Call Ed Flanagan, the Error Group, and back to the show. Heather, can you leave the audience with just one little tidbit of information that they should remember when they start researching mocktails?
Sounds like the name of her book. We should start with that.
Yes.
and where we can get it.
Yeah, so the book is coming out spring, summer. It's called Serving the Shift. The shift, obviously, from non-alcoholic to non-alcoholic. And it'll be a downloadable book. I'll send you guys a link when I get it done. Get it up and loaded for you.
Great.
But my suggestion.
What is the name for them to look at?
Serving the Shift.
Serving the Shift. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
There's lots of tools in there. And one of the tools is an audit. And I'm going to just tell you right now, if you're interested in learning about NOLO and you think that this is something that you want to capitalize on as a hospitality professional, first do a cultural analysis. Ask your servers, ask your customers, how they feel about it, how they feel about it. Because I think a lot of what's happening is the servers are not reporting up proactively. And you don't even know what you're missing out on. Lots of money. Lots of money.
Okay. Thank you, Heather. Fred, say goodbye to the folks.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it. What a great education. I think this is absolutely fascinating.
Yeah. You know, while you were talking, one of my friends came to mind. She always goes out to eat. The table orders a drink. She doesn't drink, but she ends up ordering something pink. That's her drink. She looks on the menu for something pink. Instead of ordering something pink that goes 3/4 goes back, if you're one of those people, and there are a lot of you out there, think about a mocktail. Here, they can make you something pink and you can drink it and enjoy it. So thanks again, everybody. We're going to be back next week and we hope to see you then. But until then, everybody, stay positive, test negative, and we'll see you next week. Bye now.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Heather.